Hello, and welcome to This is USG, a video podcast by the universities at Shady Grove. 9 universities, 1 campus, great results. I'm Ann Khademian, Executive Director of the universities at Shady Grove. Economic development is central to the work of all communities, states, and nations, yet it is also an incredibly intricate and complex challenge. How can communities best attract investment, grow high-paying jobs, support innovation, build wealth for everyone in a community, and do so in sustainable long-term ways? Tonight's guest is a leader in economic development, designing and implementing innovative strategies and policies to advance economic development across her career in the District of Columbia, in Montgomery County, and now in her role as delegate from Montgomery County in the House of Delegates for the state of Maryland. Delegate Lily Chee serves on the Economic Matters Committee and in the middle of her first term, and she is a strong voice not only for economic innovation, but for equity and for education. Tonight, we will focus on Delegate Chee's legislative priorities, the region's recovery process from COVID-19, the area's life sciences industry, and issues of social justice and racial discrimination. Delegate Chee, welcome to This is USG.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Khademian. I'm very excited to join you.
I'm really happy to have you as well. Thanks for joining us. I wonder if we could start off, if you could just tell us a little bit about your journey to your current position as a delegate. What brought you to public service? Was this something that you decided long ago that you were interested in serving? What brought you to this path of leadership?
Well, thank you. It's a great question to start off. Of course, it is a very odd journey that I never thought was possible when I landed in this country a little over 3 decades ago. I had to use a Walkman to learn proper English. For anyone who's not familiar with my life story, I grew up in communist China. Some people would call it socialist China. And it was a very different time and place, and it was a tumultuous time. I lived through Cultural Revolution. So when China decided to open its door to the rest of the world, a lot of young people like me decided to explore what was possible. And I had an opportunity to learn English and go to college and to study abroad. I did all of that. And when I landed an opportunity to come here, I just came by myself and wanted to see, what I could do with my life. But of course, the first decade, even more than the first decade, was extremely difficult. As I mentioned, I had to use a Walkman to record lectures in classes in order to play back the tape, right? That was the late 80s, to keep up. And over the years, I had many different jobs and careers. I think like many immigrants, we all struggled in different ways to trying to find our paths and figure out what we could do with our lives. And it was not easy without social capital, without guidance, without any real financial resources. I worked in higher education. I was lucky to be able to work in several university settings. So I'm quite familiar with higher education administration, and worked in student affairs at American University. That was the job that took me to Washington, D.C. region. And when I got my second master's degree in MBA, I started working in Washington, D.C. right when the city was taking off to revitalize the neighborhood streets and to bring in businesses and to bring in more people, more residents. So it was during the heydays of DC economic development that I was able to join the city's economic development team. And it was a wild ride, Through those opportunities, I got a sense of belonging to a particular place. And this DC region gives me the perspectives of how people like me could contribute to local communities and feel a stronger sense of ties to the local communities. And because of that, I got more involved locally. where I lived, which is Montgomery County. I joined Leadership Montgomery. I started serving on boards, committees, and commissions. And through those community service and community involvement activities, I became a community leader and got noticed by elected officials, including County Executive Ike Delegate, who was running for county executive the first term. And when he became county executive, I joined his team and became his community liaison. And then one thing led to another, people were saying, you should run for office. We need people like you to represent us, right? Our people, many immigrants who speak English as second language, were amazed that I was able to do what I did and felt like I could speak for them. At first, I just brushed off those ideas and didn't feel like politics was for people like immigrants, like us, But over time, I saw the need to step up and speak out for my community. And hopefully, I could be a role model. And it was true. My campaign brought out so much new energy that I have no regret, even though it was one of the most challenging things I did with my life. But I'm very proud to represent a district that is super diverse with a lot of Asian Americans and immigrants. And I love what I do as a state delegate, representing, among all great things and institutions, University of Shady Grove.
What a wonderful story
Thank you.
of struggle and perseverance and leadership. I I I see in your work so much innovation, and you really lead with such a can-do approach. I see you oftentimes have great ideas, but you're a doer. You really dig in and do things, and I can see that, and I can see that where that comes from in terms of your willingness to tackle big problems and your willingness to pursue big challenges, but to do so on behalf of the community and where you live, which is fantastic. So thank you for sharing that story. Tell us a little bit about how you come to economic development as an area of specialization. You mentioned your first experience in the District of Columbia. You worked with the county executive Ike Legate's team. I know you were one of the co-founders of the biohealth initiative.
Innovation. Yeah.
Innovation, which really was a remarkable way of thinking about how to grow and get investment in the life sciences. How do you come to economic development? What's your philosophy or your approach in terms of how you tackle this very complicated area?
Thank you for asking that question. I think leaders of all sectors, academic leaders, political leaders, and business leaders should all put our heads together to think about how to build a stronger economy and leverage our innovative assets and unrivaled human capital in this region, especially in a place like Montgomery County, to drive economic growth. Because one of the strongest reasons that drove me to run for office, besides speaking for people who don't have a voice, was also to make sure that this place I chose to call home is the most successful, so that we find our ways to give back and to pay forward, but in the substantive way to drive smart policies. Speaking about innovation, I'm very passionate about that because when I was working in DC economic development, it was a very different dynamic because the focus was on attracting businesses, retailers, and the people to live and to do business there. But when I came to Montgomery County, I realized that Montgomery County has something that no one else in this region could lay claim to. We have a whole cluster of federal research institutions that are really top of the world. And you don't see any other community with this level of concentration of top-notch science, especially life science area research, and of course beyond life sciences. And so I was excited to see how Montgomery County could take a leadership role to drive innovation entrepreneurship, because as we know, innovation itself is not enough. It's only when we marry innovation with entrepreneurship can we actually drive economic growth and turn those smart ideas into products and into something that can benefit the society, right? And so that connector is oftentimes the local communities or local governments or local thought leaders. Sometimes universities play that role, but I think there's a strong role local government can play. And that was why when county executive tapped me to work on his team, to work on economic development, my first project was to help him establish a public-private partnership called the Biohealth Innovation, because we have so much assets to be to be leveraged. It's a gold mine waiting to be, really explored further. I think people perceive us as a gigantic research campus. We have a lot of researchers, but how could we take it to the next level and build a strong ecosystem to support all of the researchers to take their ideas from lab to market? That's a very long journey. So the idea of biohealth innovation was just that, to leverage all of the research assets to bring in a smart team and to identify commercially viable ideas and to connect them with the technical savvy in terms of how to build businesses and the private capital. So all of these elements had to be combined in order for our businesses to be successful. And so I was very excited to be able to help structure that public-private partnership and the leverage academic leaders and business leaders. Almost all of the major Maryland biotech companies served on that board and contributed financially because they saw this was the future to take our game to the next level. So I was very excited about that. And then beyond that, we also looked at how we could have a broader economic vitality that focused on, placemaking. Because a suburban community is very challenging in terms of attracting young people. Even our kids' generation, a lot of times after they graduate from high school, they went away for college and never came back. Or they came back and chose to live in DC and even Northern Virginia, which has more urban vitality. So we need to look at how to strategically use transit-oriented placemaking to create a stronger sense of identity and a stronger sense of community to attract our younger generation, which is critical to our future economic vitality. So I worked on some of these initiatives, including Nighttime Economy Task Force, and it was really, exciting. And then, building on that, we developed a comprehensive economic strategy and decided in order to be competitive, we need to be more flexible and responsive to market needs and movements. The government bureaucracy was not the best structure for us to be competitive. So the county executive made a bold decision at the time to allow me to work with him to transition our Department of Economic Development into the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, which is another public-private partnership to leverage the business savvy and the business capital to drive economic growth. So, I can talk forever about economic development. I'm very passionate about that. But an important player in the whole economic development equation is what you are doing at University's Shady Grove.
Well, I'm eager to pick up on that with you. If I may, listening to you talk about your philosophy and your approach to economic development, it's really interesting. You're so focused on the uniqueness of place and really understanding the assets of each place. And so place building is building on the strengths that are there and building on the
That's right.
community that's there. And I also hear your emphasis on it's a collaborative approach. No one can do it alone. No amount of investment can do it. You've got to combine all the resources in a way to make it sustainable. So higher education, business, investment, the government, private sector, everyone participating in that, which is really interesting. And I think will be the key to the long-term success of Montgomery County as well. So that's great. Well, if I may, let's pick up on your last point about USG. We are very focused on trying to be a strong source of talent for this life sciences industry,
Yeah.
which is really just bubbling and ready to go with COVID and all the investments during the pandemic, the immunotherapy work, the biotechnology, the biosciences. All of this work is the future, really to be thinking about where we go from here. How do we prevent the next pandemic? How do we respond in very powerful and effective ways? And Maryland, as you said, we're right here in the heart of all of it.
Right.
Shady Grove is really dedicated to trying to ensure that we're providing a strong source of talent, students coming through the University at Shady Grove and through our partners with Montgomery County Public Schools and Montgomery College to be able to fill these high demand, high profile, great jobs as well. How do you see the role of higher education in Shady Grove in this process? And, we see ourselves as partners, but from where you sit in the state legislature, looking to Montgomery County, looking to our partnership with all 9 of our universities, what do you see as the key role for us to be playing in this venture of trying to grow the life sciences?
Thank you. It's an excellent question. There are many layers to it. I think, first of all, of course, we need to position University of Shady Grove as a really strategic economic development partner that can, be a solid foundation for us to produce an equivalent to a four-year university or even beyond, a kind of a highly credible institution for human capital, whether it's in science or not. Because one thing that is lacking in Montgomery County is that kind of recognizable higher education institution. So the combination of University of Shady Grove and our excellent community college fills a very important void for our workforce and growing industries. So that role will continue to be very important. But beyond that, I see USG as a catalyst, not only because it is very unique in its structure and its design. It is much more than just a branch campus, right? It could also be a driver of innovative ideas, because with your new building, the science, biomedical and bioengineering science, the idea is to experiment with the new ideas. Even the programs that don't exist on the University of Maryland campus or other campuses could be experimented here. And you collapse all of these programs in one place so that they can, collide and converge, and that's the beauty of innovation, right? And great ideas can go viral. So I really see that as a catalyst of not only converging many different programs into one very condensed campus environment, but also to use that as a convener and a catalyst to drive growth and bring the partners around you, because you are strategically located not only in the heart of life sciences corridor, but you are neighbors to some great institutions that are sort of unknown and hidden. But the Shady Grove Life Sciences Center is one of the country's earliest life sciences parks, right? And then that's just across the street. You're next to the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, right? And a huge biotech company is right next door to you, GlaxoSmithKline. So you have many different assets that could be better leveraged if you could play the role of being a convener. And of course, you're right next door to IBBR, which is another great sort of hidden jewel there, right? So I would love for you to play that leadership role by, by being a convener, to bring everyone together to see how this area could take off using some smart policies we have put in place, right? Including, for example, the Rise Zone tax credits in terms of incentivizing entrepreneurs to grow and place businesses around university campus and so forth. So I really think there are many opportunities for USG to be a driver, to help create a sense of place for our innovation communities. Because right now, people still think of this place as an academic institution, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm blown away by the vision, Lily, and I love it. It's very exciting. It's how we're thinking of ourselves as well, but it's so exciting to hear you think about you articulate how the role we can play in all of this as well. It's very exciting. And of course, we have our lab for entrepreneurship and transformative
Yeah.
leadership as well, which I think can really help us with some of this catalytic role that you're identifying as well. So thank you for that. We're excited to work with you and others to really bring that to fruition. So thank you. Shifting gears a little bit,
Sure.
I think we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel with COVID-19. And, this has been such a brutal time for so many businesses and so many individuals and families, and so stressful. And of course, the legislature has really risen to the occasion to do their best to support everybody during this time. So thank you, as a leader at the state level, for doing all you can to support everyone through this time. Um, how do you see the economy coming out of COVID-19? Where do you see as the bright spots and possibilities? What do you see as some of the challenges that we're still facing coming out of COVID?
Well, I think the economy has evolved and responded to this year-long pandemic life that we are living. We are seeing some businesses thriving because they either learn to pivot or they have a very strong online presence. So businesses that help other businesses grow their online presence is a good direction to go. But we have also seen people, seeing the future of some of the innovations that happened because of our need to have to adjust to a pandemic-driven online lifestyle now is here to stay, right? They are actually great ideas, just are good for business ideas even during normal times, if there's ever such a thing as normal, But at the same time, I have to say that Maryland is extraordinarily fortunate because of our large innovation assets and large federal government presence here, footprint here. We are almost the recession, resilient and the pandemic resilient in that way, right? We not only have got direct aid from federal government, which has been very, very helpful, but also because of our strong infrastructure, research infrastructure, especially in life sciences and biotechnology, we got nearly, over 40%, nearly half of the nation's investments from the federal government into our vaccine development and development of test kits and a lot of those things. And that is a very important driver of local economic growth and job growth, And we sometimes take these things for granted, but not many communities can lay claim to what we have here, right? So it was because of our decades of very intentional investments in those community infrastructures to build up those industries that now we can reap the benefits of that. So it's really important. So talking about how the economy can come out of woods, there will be new innovation in response to the pandemic, preparedness and responsiveness, just like what USG is doing is critically important. There will be, new innovation coming out of how people commute to work or not, right? I think there will be also, new ideas related to equity issues, how to elevate the traditionally marginalized communities to be part of this business and economic vitality. So I'm quite optimistic about that. Beyond that, I just think this pandemic gave us each a lot of time to reflect and think about a lot of things that we just used to take for granted. And now we are living in a world where the social and economic factors are sort of integrated when we consider a lot of things. We used to think of business as business issues and social issues as just social issues. And now I think many different forces are converging and forcing us to think very cohesively about people-centric economy, about people-centric businesses, about why we exist, why these social institutions exist, right? And so I think this is an incredibly exciting time for our economic recovery, and there's going to be a lot of new ideas. So I am really looking forward to seeing how our region's economy is going to evolve. But overall, I think we not only survived, but we are doing well. Some of the traditional industries, yes, got a hit in the short term, but overall, I think the picture is quite rosy.
Yeah, well, that's That's great. And I appreciate your focus too on the equity challenges. I want to come back to that in a minute, but I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you see as your legislative priorities going into next year. Could be COVID related, or just thinking about in general the community and where you want to focus attention. What do you see as the things that you really would like to lift up and focus on in the next legislative session? I know we just finished one, and you're no doubt exhausted from a very intense and successful session. But as you think about next year, where is your energy going? What are your priorities going to be for the legislative session coming up?
Well, my legislative priority has always been shaped by, one, my, deep passion about economic development and innovation entrepreneurship, but the other is my immigrant experience. So I generally focus on two areas. One is how to make ourselves more competitive and vibrant as a community and as a state. And two is how to bring more people into the fold and to speak for those who are voiceless. And to help the marginalized the communities. So, for example, this session, I introduced 19 bills, and more than half of them are related to economic development or small business. And fortunately, 10 of my bills passed this session, which is a record for me, exceeding my expectations. Quite a few of them have to do with innovation. Entrepreneurship, like a technical assistance program, advanced clean energy economy, kind of bills that would better leverage the private capital and create a state-sponsored green bank. And those are very exciting things because we not only want to transition quickly to clean energy, but we want to leverage the economic opportunities and grow jobs at the same time. And another bill that I introduced that also passed would grow Maryland's advanced manufacturing economy. So those things really get me excited. At the same time, I try to do my best to remove barriers for small businesses to do business. And on the other side of the equation, as I said, because I struggled a lot when I was an immigrant, when I first came here in this country, I want to make sure that we build up government cultural competency. So I introduced several pieces of legislation to shine spotlight in certain areas to make sure that we combat discrimination even in the public sector, and we require data sharing across the state and county governments on certain issues, and we require certain reporting of some industry practices in order to better protect the workforces that have been historically marginalized, such as home care workers, who are a vast majority women of color, and so and I introduced and passed a bill to create a statewide LGBTQ commission, which is an issue I also feel strongly about. So I will continue to focus on these two major general areas. One is how to make ourselves more inclusive, and two is how to make ourselves more competitive. And I don't think these are zero-sum games. We have to do both.
Yeah, wonderful priorities, and clear why you have been elected, and why you have so much support for the work you're doing as well. So thank you for both of those priorities. I wonder if we could build on your focus on equity in particular and inclusion. You wrote a special piece for Maryland Matters recently that highlighted some of the discriminatory and bigoted language that was being used by colleagues in the House. But what I really took from that was just the leadership voice that you are sharing, and setting a standard, really trying to set a standard for the way politics should be done. And I think, it's the last several years, we really have had a crisis of leadership in not being, in not having kind of strong voices for equity, for inclusion, and but I see that in all that you do, and I'm wondering, have you always had a strong voice for this? You note that this is a policy area, that this is one of your priorities, to really focus on inclusivity, speaking for those who don't have a voice. Is this something that you have kind of grown into and that you've evolved in your leadership style, or is this something that's been with you always. You're a very strong person with a, very strong set of priorities. I'm just curious how you find your voice in this area that is, very difficult and very painful, but also so important and so essential for our future.
Yeah, this is a critical issue, and I'm so glad you focus on this. I think as women professionals, right, professional women, we have all struggled in our own ways and have been uh, sort of not taken seriously enough at some points in our career or have been dismissed, right? And I think we could all share different stories throughout our career, young or too old, never just the right. As a woman, you are also, either too aggressive or not aggressive enough or whatever. So to answer your question about how to find my voice, it takes some practice. It takes some self-encouragement, long talks with myself and say, I have been through this kind of struggle before. When is going to be my turn to speak my authentic voice, right? And in these days, when I was asked to give young people advice, new graduates or whatever, I said, don't ever apologize for who you are. Bring your whole authentic self to work. Your job doesn't define you, you define your job. Everywhere you go, you just try to find out what is my value to this place, right? But for me, who's going to say what I'm about to say, So because your voice is not only important, it's probably what's missing at the table. And over time, you come to realize that what you have to say is valuable. And it is your responsibility to assert your voice, not only because it will add value to people's work and their way of thinking, but it can benefit so many people who are not at the table. And especially as an elected representative, it's my job to represent the people who otherwise would not have a chance, a fighting chance. So that was the reason why, I decided to speak up. It was not an easy decision because he's my colleague. When I had to name a name and call out bigoted behavior or language, it took some courage. But I decided, in this national, in the light of the national tragedy of shooting death and targeting Asian Americans and all the hate crimes that reared its ugly head, the culture of marginalization and otherization of people who look and sound different. If people like me who are in elected visible positions don't speak out, then how could we, expect other people to? One of the most important self-empowerment action is to speak out. Which was why I decided to write that op-ed piece. And the response has been enormous. So many of my colleagues, especially female colleagues, were very thankful that I spoke out, that I, was brave enough to confront bigotry as I saw it. Because, violence and the targeted violent shooting is not something we experience in Montgomery County every day. And yet, those kind of language, people just kind of laugh it off and dismiss it and never realize that could also be hurtful and create an image of otherization that needs to be stopped, So I think there is a lot each of us can do to make sure that we don't subscribe to this white supremacy kind of myth, and each of us can do our part to build coalition with other minority communities and take our responsibility to make sure we confront and take our piece, take ownership of our place in history, so to speak.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much. I know in higher education, we need to find a stronger voice as well in our role in this, which is educating people about,
Yeah.
inclusivity, about, equality, about critical thinking, about reasonableness and reason skills. I think we all have a really important role to play in creating a much more inclusive future. But I'm really grateful to you for your voice and the example that you're setting for all of us to speak our mind and to say what we believe, because if we don't, who else will say it, right? So,
Yeah.
well, I think on that note, I will say thank you so much for a wonderful conversation, and thank you for your leadership for Montgomery County and for the state of Maryland. And I know you're going to continue to do wonderful things in economic development and in promoting a more inclusive Montgomery County and state as well. So thank you so much, Lily.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.